guys, since today we eat dinner quite late and I have plenty of time until I have to study, that's why I decided to read a book. Let's continue reading the book that we still read. And right now we will read chapter 15. Did you remember in chapter 14? That's when Shirley, she went to school and she has so much fun there. She really impressed the teacher, right? So let's continue chapter 15 to see how it goes. Alright. 15. Chubby was waiting for us, swinging on the gate like a little girl. She had her head cocked, one eyebrow raised. "Well, how did you lot get on?" she asked. "We're not going back there again. Ever," said Kevin. "Are we?" "Never," I said, though I was still glowing with the thought that I was better than anyone else at vocabulary. I was better than Marilyn Henderson. Mr. Mitford might smile at her and make her monitor, but he recommended his favorite books to me. Not that I wanted to read old-fashioned boys' books, and not that I liked Mr. Mitford. "Our teacher's a total sadist," I said. "He's sad?" Chubby looked puzzled. "No, sadist, when you're like being horribly mean and cruel to people for no reason," I said. "I think you mean sadist," said Chubby, laughing. Kevin laughed too. "There, thought you were so good at vocabulary," he said. Archie laughed as well, though he didn't have a clue why. He jumped up beside Chubby and swung too. "How about you, little man? How did you get on? Have you got a mean, scary teacher like Mr. Mitford?" she asked, rubbing her hand lightly over the tiny prickles on his head. "How did you know ours was called Mr. Mitford?" I asked. "We didn't tell you his name, did we?" "There's only one Mr. Mitford. Give you the strap soon as look at you," said Chubby. I was that scared of him I nearly wet myself every time he looked at me. "He once taught you?" It was difficult to take it in. Of course I knew Chubby must have been a child once, but it was hard imagining her little, though she still wasn't much bigger than a child. "My teacher's nice," said Archie complacently. "She read us a story, and any girl or boy who's extra good gets a sweetie at the end of the week. She show us the tin. I'm gonna get one on Friday, I betcha." "That's right, my lovely," said Chubby, jumping off the gate and swinging off him too. "Come on then, I expect you're hungry. I've got a treat waiting for you." She made us cake, a yellow slab cake with cherries. She cut us each a big slice. Mrs. Wawe came and joined us in the kitchen. She was dressed in a shirt and slacks and her beautiful suede shoes, but her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. It made her face look even vague than ever, just a mist of pale features. She asked us how we got on, but she didn't really seem to be listening to our answers. "Did you have Mr. Mitford as your teacher when you were a little girl, Mrs. Waverly?" I asked. She blinked at me. "Mrs. Matt didn't go to the village school, silly," said Chubby. "I didn't really go to school when I was your age," Mrs. Waverly said, making an effort. "You never went to school? You lucky beggar," said Kevin, wolfing down another slice of cake. "I had a governess, though. She was quite very strict, especially with me. Then my parents sent me away to boarding school," she said, sipping her tea. "Oh, you lucky thing," I said. I would borrow a whole series of boarding school books from the library, and the girls always played tricks on each other and had midnight feast and talk boxes. I hated it, said Mrs. Waverly. "It was a convent, and I'm sure the nuns were even stricter than your Mr. Mitford." "Sister Josephine is certainly strict," I said. "She's my friend Jessica's teacher, Mrs. Waverly. Couldn't Jessica come to tea?" "I don't think it will be allowed, and if her nuns are anything like my nuns," she said. "Couldn't you ask Lady Amersham, though? You said she was your sister," I persisted. Chubby looked astonished. Someone's been chatting to the kiddies, she remarked. You've got a lady for a sister, Kevin asked with his mouth full. So you must be spunky potion ever so rich. I glared at him tacklenesses. Mrs. Waverly shook her head. I'm not at all posh, Kevin. Not nowadays, she said. She couldn't be rich either. I thought she didn't have enough money to furnish all her rooms. Perhaps she would spend it all on the miniature furniture for the doll's house. Yet she could not earn in new clothes from head to toe. I didn't like my tunic and clodhoppers, but I could see that it was very generous of her in the circumstances. I felt rude persisting, but I wanted to see Jessica so badly. Saturday seemed so far away. Perhaps if you asked Lady Amersham if Jessica could come to tea as a special favor, that she would tell all those bossy nuns to let her come. They would have to do as she suggested, seeing as she accommodating the entire convent. I said, accommodate? That's that fancy word you said in vocabulary, said Kevin. She got them all right, Mrs. Waverly. She's a real brain box. I blushed. I hadn't to tell Mrs. Waverly or Chubby myself because it sounded like boasting, but I was grateful to Kevin for letting them know. It might even make Mrs. Waverly give in, but she was smiling wistfully. Well done, Shirley. But I'm afraid Lady Amersham wouldn't want your friend to come to tea, and I don't entertain any more, she told me. No visitors, unless they force it upon us like you three, said Chubby. And I suppose now we're at war, we've got to do our bit, haven't we? When Mrs. Waverly drifted away to her sitting room, Chubby looked at us meaningfully. Stop arresting her, and don't mention Lady Amersham again. Mrs. Matt and her ladyship don't speak no more, she said. They've had a row? I asked with interest. What was it about? Nosy Pocker, said Chubby, waggling her own nose impressively. Archie tried to copy her but failed. Kevin and I couldn't manage it either. How do you do that? It's one of my magic tricks, said Chubby. I know who you remind me of. It's Mary Poppins, I said. And who's she when she's at home? Said Chubby. She's this nanny lady in books. She looks after some children and she does all these magic tricks and takes them to meet magic people. I love it when they eat their tea upside down. I said, well, I'll turn you upside down if you like, and you can eat the rest of your cake with your head on the floor and your feet waggling in the air. But I don't blame you if you choke, said Chubby. No one could stand on their heads, said Archie, giggling. Oh, yes, they could. Chubby stepped out of her sloppy slippers, tucked her skirt and penny into the legs of her long, elasticated knickers, as if she were going paddling, and then did a perfect handstand. Feed me a bit of cake. Go on, she said. Archie posted a chair in her mouth, and she ate it, grinning. You're exactly like her, I said. She sounds no snippy, and she's actually very kind. And she does surprising things, and so do you. I don't do anything surprising. Chubby swung herself neatly upright again, and slotted her slippers back on her feet. But maybe I'm a little bit magic. Then magic it so we don't have to go back to that awful school no more, said Kevin. Oh, there's a limit to my power, sunshine, said Chubby. Well, I'm not gonna back no matter what, Kevin whispered to me. Maybe Chubby heard too, because the next morning she didn't take her to the wooden gates. She insisted on marching with us all the way to school. We were forced into school that day, and the next, and the next, and the next. Mr. Mitford stayed just as frightening. He strapped 2 more metal-rich boys, rapped many knuckles with his ruler, threw the blackboard eraser at several heads, and bellowed us all every day. But when he returned the composition about our holidays, he given me a 9 out of 10, with a little red ink star and a message. Well done, Shirley. A very good effort. When everyone compared notes at break time, I found out by eavesdropping that Marilyn had only got 6 and had to write out all her spelling mistakes 5 times. It turned out 6 was a good mark by Mr. Mitford's standards. Poor Kevin got 1 out of 10 and a much cuttered message. Disgraceful. Mr. Mitford picked on Kevin almost as much as on the Meadow Ridge boys. He didn't strap him, but once he leaned forward across the first row of cross-legged Paradise Road children and slapped him about the head simply because he made a silly mistake in mental arithmetic. Kevin struggled desperately not to cry. "Cheer up, lad. I'm doing you a favor," said Mr. Mitford, "simply trying to flatten out those dreadful ears of yours." He leered the class, clearly requiring a response. Most of the children tittered in a hysterical fashion. I kept my face poker still, but I didn't dare show my feelings any further. I hated myself for my cowardice, especially when Mr. Mitford smiled at me and called me dear. "You're definitely teacher's pets," said Kevin as we toiled up the hill on Friday. Archie zigzagging in front of us, arms stretched out because he was being an aeroplane. "No, I'm not," I said. Kevin rolled his eyes. "I'm bleeding obvious, and you know it. Do you think I should ask him not to keep picking on you?" My tummy turned over the very thought, but I felt I had to offer. "As if that's gonna work," said Kevin. "He'll just start picking on you too if he thinks you're siding with me." "Well, if you're sure," I said, breathing out heavily. "Anyway, don't let's talk about old bully Mitford and that bully school. We're free now for 2 whole days," said Kevin, and he raised his arms and chased after Archie in a game of bomber pilots. It was wonderful to wake up on a Saturday knowing I'll be seeing Jessica that afternoon. I didn't even have to wear my awful tunic, as Chubby wanted to get my blouse washed over that weekend. She already washed and mended my pleated skirt. She got it looking as good as new, pearl white, but had been able to press the pleats of the skirt back into shape. They stuck out in a sort of frill now. She apologized gruffly, but I didn't mind particularly. In fact, when I slipped the bodice over my head, I was thrilled. I didn't have a looking glass, but it felt as if I was wearing a proper tutu. I spent 10 minutes dancing around my room barefoot, attempting all the movements Pauline, Petrova, and Posy learned at Madame Fiddler's stage school. It was actually an advantage having a room without any furniture. I could whirl around, fling out my arms, and attempting pirouettes. I didn't overbalance once. I decided to practice every morning. I knew I needed a proper ballet teacher if I were ever going to become a serious dancer. But if I practice my exercise and build up my stamina and read those ballet classes passages over and over again, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to attend a proper ballet school when I went home. I learned vocabulary from book reading, so maybe I could learn dancing too. When I went down to breakfast, I had to wear the horrible clodhoppers because my red shoes hurt so badly now. The heels of my new shoes went clackety-clack. Perhaps I could try tap dancing. I shuffle-tapped my way down the stairs, feeling just like Ginger Rogers. "Hey, Missy, was it you making that racket on the stairs? Don't climb about like that. You'll scuff all the woodwork, and I'm the poor soul who has to polish it," Chubby said, but I didn't let her lower my spirits. "Don't nag, Chubby," I said, and I gave her waist a quick squeeze. She felt astonishingly little and bony underneath her baggy pinafore. "Cheeky monkey. Still, it's nice to see you all perky. Go and see if them hens have been obliging ducks," she said. "I could only find 4 eggs. Well done. One for all of us," said Chubby. "But what about Mrs. Waverly? She's having her breakfast in bed, so she won't see it's an egg day," she said. "She can have mine," I offered. "But you're only a skinny little girl and she's a great big woman. You need the nourishment, said Chubby. Dear Lord, you haven't decided you won't eat eggs as well as a rabbit. No, I just wanted to give Mrs. Waverly my egg. And can I take her tray up to her? I asked. All right, funny face, said Chubby. So you're sticking up to her as well as Mr. Mitford, said Kevin sourly. So what? I said, refusing to be riled. I ran around to the kitchen door, remembering the straggling roses near the hen house. I didn't have the kitchen scissors with me, but I managed to break off a little pink rose without getting too scratched. Then, while Chubby was making Mrs. Waverly toast and pouring her tea, I found a little blue vase and put the rose in. Pretty, said Chubby approvingly. Mind you don't knock it over going up the stairs. I was very careful. I walked slowly along the corridor, posing outside the locked door. I peered hard at it, as if I thought the wood might turn into a widow, and so I could have one more look at the magical house. I'll make reasonable progress with my own cardboard effort. I got Kevin's and Archie's shoebox and stuck them on top of the others so the house had 3 stories, and I've attempted some furniture. Chubby packet of players, weighed cigarettes, become a 3-piece suit, and I turned Mr. Bentley hanky into cushion, and pillow and a bedspread. The bed itself was a cracked, all-long pin tray I found in a kitchen cupboard, but the slice of bread mattress had to be renewed every other day. I hadn't managed the bathroom yet, but I discovered that an egg cup was the right shape for a WC. The chief resident of my house was much too big for it. Timmy Ted squashed the furniture and bumped his head on the ceiling whenever he stood up. Chubby said she'll show me how to make a little doll out of a clothes pig, but she hadn't got around to it yet. I didn't think a peg doll would look very realistic. I thought of the 2 beautifully modeled dolls in Mrs. Waverly's house and ate. She didn't answer when I knocked on her door. After 3 goes, I opened it cautiously. Mrs. Waverly was still asleep, lying on her back with her hair spread over the pillow. I said her name softly when she didn't stir. I wondered if I dare scrub off the key in her jewelry box and tiptoe next door with it so I could have another look at the doll's house. I bent right over her, checking her she was deeply asleep, when she suddenly opened her blue eyes. We both jumped violently. I sprang backwards as she sat up. My goodness, Shirley, you startled me, she said. You rubbed her eyes, and I was having such a lovely dream. We were sitting watching the sunset under the cedar tree, and I said, puzzled. No, silly. It was. Then she shook her head. Sorry, I'm still half asleep. What are you in my bedroom, Shirley? I brought for your breakfast tray. Shall I plump up your pillow so you can sit up properly? I fussed around her and then carefully laid the tray on her knees. A rose? How sweet of Chubby. And I see it's an egg day. I went to fetch them. And there were only 4, actually, I said. Mrs. Waverly didn't take in significance of my statement. She ate, daintily but greedily. Are you enjoying your egg, Mrs. Waverly? I didn't have one. I said, don't you like eggs, Shirley? Yes, but I wanted you to have mine, I said, and the rose was my idea. That was very sweet of you. Why are you being so nice to me? Mrs. Waverly asked, peering at me from behind her curtain of hair. I decided to come straight out with it. So you will be in a very good mood and drive us to the village this afternoon. I'm not sure about that, dear. I don't think we're supposed to make unnecessary car journeys now there's a war on, she said. Oh, well, we could walk, couldn't we? You wouldn't even need to come with us. Kevin, Archie, and I walk to school every day, don't we? So we can go down to the village, can't we? You promise, I said eagerly. Are you wanting any sweets by any chance? She asked. Well, sweets would be lovely, though I think I'm gonna start saving any money I get, I said hopefully. But most of all, I want to see my friend Jessica. Oh, I see. You know what it's like when you have a very best friend, and you just can't wait to see them. I said. Yes, I do, said Mrs. Waverly, smiling at me. Very well, you can all three go over to the village, so as long as you behave yourselves. Can you bring me my handbag? We'll be good as gold, I said, fetching it from the dressing table. Mrs. Waverly took 3 yellow 3-penny bits from her purse. Pocket money for the 3 of you, she said, handing them over. So what are you saving for, Shirley? I would like a little doll's house doll, I said. She stared at me. Why do you want a doll's house doll? She asked softly. You haven't got a doll's house. Her blue eyes looked suspicious. I forced myself to keep looking back at her, thinking of ice and polar bears that I couldn't plush. I'm making one, I said. I love shoe boxes. Mrs. Waverly relaxed. Oh, that's a lovely idea. The only trouble is, I really need more shoe boxes, I said. I would love to make some extra rooms. I haven't even managed a kitchen yet. Ah, you're taking this project seriously, said Mrs. Waverly. Go and look in my wardrobe. I blinked at her. I hadn't been hinting. I've only been thinking aloud. I opened the wardrobe, trying to feign surprise and admiration for her dresses, even though I already peeped at them. There are on the floor at the front were her suit wedges, and behind them were 3 shoe boxes. Take out the shoes. I keep them in the boxes to be tidy, but I don't really need them. You build your extension, dear, said Mrs. Waverly. Are you sure? You're so kind. I removed some smart court shoes, a pair of Concord colored working shoes, and 2 sparkly silver dancing shoes with peep toes. Mrs. Waverly sighed when she saw them, screwing up her face. Are you all right? I asked. Yeah, those shoes bring back memories, that's all, she murmured. But take the boxes. So if you're absolutely sure, they'll be so useful for my doll's house. You must show it to me sometimes, but run along now. I think I might have a little nap. I'll see if I can go back to my dream. I skipped up, clutching the boxes. Kevin and Archie wanted me to go out in the woods with them, but I didn't fancy playing silly boys' game. I borrowed glue and scissors from Chubby and turned my house into a 6-roomed palace. I still had the 3 shoebox lid, so I can make a white stove and a sink. Chubby brought me a glass of milk and a biscuit for Elvis's, and admired my effort. You're making a neat little job of that house, Shirley, she said. I wish I could figure out how to make saucepan for the stove and tap for a sink. If I had a bar of chocolate, I could use a silver paper, but I haven't got any. I said. I was really hinting this time, wondering if Chubby had a fried chocolate cream or a Kit Kat hidden away in the kitchen cupboard. Wait a minute, she said, and she shuffled off. She didn't bring me a bar of chocolate, but she gave me a large bowl of crumpled silver paper. I used to save it for Christmas, but we don't bother with decoration nowadays. You use it, Shirley, she said. Thank you so much, I said, thrilled, though of course I have like a chocolate bar too. I spent most of the morning making kitchen equipment. It was fiddly work, especially the taps, but very satisfying. Timmy Ted came to watch, though he didn't seem particularly impressed. They was working so hard to make him a beautiful home. I tried to prop him up, but he kept falling on his back and starting vacantly up at the ceiling. He wouldn't chat to me anymore. He stayed a shabby little toy with sewn on mouth. I conjured up my ballet shoe girls instead, though they all had very different ideas. Pauline wanted me to turn one of the shoe boxes into a glamorous movie star apartment with cream carpets and a furniture and a grand piano in the corner. So she said I should turn my vest into a carpet, which seemed possible, but I didn't have any clue how to fashion a piece of cardboard into a piano, complete with movable lid and a black for white keys. Petrova wanted me to construct a garage with several cars inside. I rolled my eyes at the idea of making cardboard cars, but she said I could buy a dinky car at the toy shop this afternoon. I didn't think I have enough money for a dinky car, and I hadn't seen a toy shop in the village, but I did like the idea of miniature cars in a garage. It would help my house look more real. Posey thought that these were both silly ideas. I absolutely had to make a practice room for a ballet with a bear and a mirror, and she wanted me to see lots of little girls and their exercise clothes doing pirouettes. Little girls at the front had to have red hair like her. A ballet room seemed relatively simple. I could glue a little wooden rod to the cardboard wall. I could make do with stick if necessary. I didn't have a mirror, but I was sure Mrs. Worley would have one in her handbag. Maybe she would lend it to me. However, I didn't see how I could make lots of little ballet pupils. I was limited to pet dolls, and their legs would be too stiff for dancing. I told Pauline, Petrova, and Posey that it was my house, and therefore I made the decision. So they wandered off in a huff. See if I care, I muttered, but my fingers had started to ache with all the cutting out, and had cramped in my legs from crouching. I decided to have a rest and read instead. I started the first few pages of ballet shoes, but I knew it so well by now that the words appeared in my head, even before my eyes got to them. I tried a little princess instead, and was soon absorbed. I wish I looked like Sarah Crewe, with her long black hair, and maybe I could roll my hair at Meadowridge. At home, Mom carted me off to her hairdresser to have an inch snipped off every 6 weeks. There was nothing I could do about my boring brown eyes. They even had the wrong expressions. Stop looking at me all wistful and pleading like a bally dog, Mom had said once. I loved Mom more than anyone in the whole world, and I missed her terribly. But I couldn't help thinking it was more peaceful here, without her nagging me all the time. Sarah didn't seem to mind not having a mother. She loved her father unconditionally. And no wonder he went to such length to buy her Emily, her wonderful doll. The description of Emily and all her amazing outfits was my favorite passage in the whole book. I read slowly, savoring every detail, and enjoyed the bittersweet part where Sarah had to say goodbye to her papa. I remember saying goodbye to my dad. It wasn't quite the same. I was used to Dad going away. He traveled all over the southeast of England, taking orders for his brushes. He was away the whole week, staying in cheap bed and breakfast, or even working men's hostel, as if he hadn't made many sales. He always brought fish and chips back with him, so I looked forward to Friday nights, but neither Mom and I made a song and dance of seeking himself. We weren't a family for big hugs and kisses. Dad would just pat my head and said, "How are you?" his silly name for me. I would say I was champion, because I've heard it on the radio show and it always made Dad laugh. I suddenly longed to be back home, with Dad coming through the door and petting me and calling me. Sarah's papa never came home again. He hadn't gone away to where? To war. He's simply gone somewhere aboard and caught a fever. Dad might be fighting already. Now that we were actually at war, he might be wounded. I saw him in a hospital bed, groaning softly, a large bandage around his head. He might even be dead. "Stop it," I said, slapping the side of my head. I wish. I didn't imagine things so easily. What if Dad never ever comes back? I heard shouting downstairs, and went to see what was going on. The front door was open and Kevin and Archie were capering excitedly. In the drive as a huge truck dropped you out of the house. It says, "Army" on the side. "It's soldiers. They're coming here," Kevin yelled excitedly. "Bang, bang, bang," said Archie, shooting fiercely with 2 fingers. Chubby stood in the doorway, telling them to calm down. "It's not real army men, you pair of sillies, or navy men either. It's the name of the department store in London. They'll have bought you current pads at last, and about time. They were ordered nearly a week ago," she said, admonishing the delivery men who climbed out of the truck. "Keep your hair on, missus. Don't you know there's a war on?" One man said, "Oh, that's going to be your excuse for bad service from now on, is it?" said Chubby. "Miss Hoity-toity," said the other. They carried on joshing each other as the men took the beds and various other parcels through the door and up the stairs, Chubby at their heels like a terrier, telling them to watch the paint and look sharp. They were all insulting each other, and yet I could see by the way the men were looking at Chubby, and that they liked her, and she seemed to like them too. Her face flushed, and her eyes sparkled, and there were dimples in her cheek. She looked much younger and much prettier. I wondered why she had never got married and set herself up in her own house. I remember the photograph of her dancing with a good-looking young man in white. Perhaps her sweetheart died in the war. That brought back all my fears about Dad, but I managed to blot them out in the bustle of unpacking the beds. They were good, sturdy ones made of metal and deep blue canvas, and we had blue down sleeping bags to match, with feather pillows. There were also 3 different sizes, large, medium, and small. Count yourself lucky we were able to bring you a large one, Mrs. The manufacturers are working night and day to keep the army supplies, the man said. They brought a length of pink rubber sheeting too. Chubby fitted into a small bed, tactfully waiting until the delivery man had gone. "Though let's hope you won't need it, Archie," she said. "You're going to be a big boy now you got your own lovely new bed, aren't you?" Did you hear what those men said? These are soldier beds. You're a soldier now, and soldiers never ever wet their beds, do they? "I don't wet the bed," said Archie, "and I won't wet this one, I promise." He was so excited about his camp bed that he climbed into his sleeping bag and lay down, ready to go to sleep. "Night, night," he called, and he shut his eyes. "Bless them," said Chubby. "Come on, Archie, up you get. You haven't even had your dinner yet. Now, mind you all 3 said thank you to Mrs. Mad. It was very kind of her to buy you 3 such lovely beds." Archie actually threw his arm around Mrs. Wawe and gave her a big hug. I thanked her politely, wondering how I might have a miniature camp bed for my doll's house. Kevin said nothing at all until Chubby prompted him. Then he mumbled thank you in an expressionless voice. He was very quiet all through dinner and didn't even clear his plate. It was a delicious dinner too. I've been dreading another rabbit pie, but it was a fish pie instead, with big chunks of cod and mashed potato instead of pastry. "I went chasing out of the fish van especially yesterday," said Chubby, "simply because some fussy little madam turns her nose up at my lovely rabbit pie." "The fussy little madam is very grateful," I said. "This fish pie is scrumptious." "Scrumptious, is it?" said Chubby. "Is that one of Mr. Mitford's words? They make you spell it too. You're a brain box." I felt lit up with happiness. Being thought clever was usually an embarrassment. Children mocked me and called me names. Grown up were much better. Even Mom had energy to her voice when I showed her marks at school. "Well, it comes easy to you, doesn't it?" she said. "Don't go thinking you're better than anyone else, and you might be a little boffin when it comes to English and arithmetic, but I'll score you not out of 10 when it comes to common sense." We had pudding too, creamy rice with a big spoonful of raspberry jam. "You make lovely meals, Chubby," I said gratefully, finishing every scrap and wishing it could lick around my bowl. "Doesn't she just—" "Mrs. Waverly, I think we will need a nap now we're so full." Yes, yes," said Archie, desperate to get back in his camp bed. "But aren't we going to the village? You promised we could." "There's plenty of time, silly. Just have a little lie down till 2. Read a book if you like," said Mrs. Waverly. For once in my life, I couldn't settle to reading. I was in such a fever to get into the village and find Jessica. After, I would try out my camp bed and read a page or two of Little Princess. I went downstairs and sat in the hall, watching the grandfather clock. I was also to go and gather the boys when it struck 2. At 5 to 2, there was a loud rapping the front door. I wonder if it might be more delivery men I want to see. Mom was standing in the doorway. Sounds good. So maybe in chapter 16, her mom came to visit. So interesting. So I will see you in chapter 16 for another news. Bye. See you next time.